The sentence that broke my heart was spoken so calmly that for a moment, I thought I had misunderstood it. If you want to stay here, Mother, you have to accept my husband's rules. Otherwise, it would be better if you left. My daughter said it while standing near the dining table, her hands folded, her eyes carefully avoiding mine. The afternoon light was falling across the floor, and I remember noticing how quiet the room felt, as if even the air had stopped moving. I had lived in that house for 8 months. I had rocked migrants into sleep there, folded their laundry, cooked meals, and quietly tried to make their lives easier. I never believed I was a burden. I believed I was family. But in that moment, I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I looked at my daughter. This was the same child whose fevered forehead I had kissed through long nights, whose school shoes I had polished, whose tears I had wiped without ever counting the cost. And now she could not meet my eyes. Her husband stood near the window, silent, saying nothing. He didn't need to. The silence itself carried authority. What rules? I asked gently. My daughter hesitated, then spoke in a careful voice as if repeating words she had practiced. Just small things, not interfering in household decisions, not correcting the child in front of us, not inviting neighbors without asking, and not questioning how we manage our money. Her voice was polite, but every word felt like a wall being built brick by brick between us. I nodded slowly. I understood what she was really saying. It wasn't about rules. It was about control and about making it clear that I no longer belonged. Something inside me had, but strangely, I did not feel anger, only a deep, quiet sadness, like watching the tide pull away from the shore. I smiled. It was not a forced smile, nor a bitter one. It was the kind of smile that comes when the heart finally understands something it had been refusing to see. I see, I said softly. Neither of them stopped me when he walked to my room. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, looking at the small suitcase I had brought with me months ago. I had unpacked it with hope, believing I would stay surrounded by love. Now I opened it again, folding my clothes carefully, one by one, as if each movement helped me hold my dignity together. I did not cry. Not then. When I stepped out, my daughter was in the kitchen. I paused for a moment, hoping, perhaps foolishly, that she would turn, that she would say, "Mother, wait." I didn't mean it like that, but she didn't turn. I lifted my suitcase and walked to the door. My grandson was asleep in the next room. I placed my hand lightly on the doorframe, whispering a silent prayer for him, for her, and perhaps for myself. Then I left. The evening air outside was cool. The sky was turning gold, the kind of quiet sunset that makes the world feel peaceful, even when your heart is not. As I walked away from my daughter's house, I realized something that hurt more than her words. It was not the rules that had pushed me out. It was the realization that love, once so natural between us, had slowly been replaced by distance. And I had only just noticed it. The first night in my small apartment felt longer than any night I could remember. It wasn't the silence itself that hurt me. I had lived alone before after my husband passed away, and I knew how to sit quietly with my thoughts. But this silence was different. It carried questions that had no easy answers. I placed my suitcase in the corner and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was neat, but unfamiliar, with pale walls and a single window overlooking a narrow street. A small clock ticked on the wall, each second sounding louder than it should have. For the first time since leaving my daughter's house, I allowed myself to cry. The tears came quietly, not with sobs or shaking, but like rain that falls steadily through the night. I wasn't crying because I had left. Deep in my heart, I knew I had done the right thing. I was crying because I had finally understood something painful. That love can fade in ways so subtle that you only see the emptiness after it is gone. In the days that followed, I kept myself busy. I cleaned the apartment, cooked simple meals, and watered the 2 small plants on the windowsill. Routine became my companion. It helped me move through the hours without drowning in memories. But memories came anyway. I remembered the way my daughter used to call me every evening, even after her marriage, just to tell me about her day. I remember how she once said, "Mother, I don't know what I would do without you." I used to believe those words would always be true. Slowly, as the quiet days passed, I began to notice things I had ignored before. Small moments that at the time had seemed harmless. I remembered how, in the past few months, my daughter had begun speaking less when we were alone. How she would glance at her husband before answering simple questions, as if measuring her words. How decisions about the household were discussed in closed rooms, and I was told about them afterward, politely but firmly. At the time I had told myself, they are young. They are building their own life. I must not be sensitive. I had mistaken distance for maturity, silence for respect. One afternoon, I found an old photograph while arranging my drawer. It was a picture of my daughter at the age of 7 sitting on my lap, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck. I remembered that day clearly. She had fallen at school and scraped her knee. She cried for hours and I had stayed beside her until she fell asleep holding my hand. Looking at that photograph, I felt a quiet realization settle in my heart. People do not change suddenly. They change slowly in ways that are almost invisible until one day the distance is too wide to cross. The pain in my chest began to soften. Not because I missed her less, but because I began to see the situation more clearly. I understood that my daughter was not cruel. She was weak. She was trying to please her husband to maintain peace in her home. Perhaps even to avoid conflict she was afraid to face. And in doing so, she had allowed me to become the easiest sacrifice. This realization did not fill me with anger. It filled me with a calm sadness and a strange kind of clarity. For the first time in many years, I began to think not about what my daughter needed, but about what I needed. And in that quiet apartment, with the afternoon light falling softly across the floor, I began to understand that silence, painful as it was also teaching me something important. It was teaching me how to stand on my own heart again. It was the 7th morning since I had left my daughter's house. When my phone began buzzing incessantly on the kitchen counter, I almost ignored it, assuming it was a telemarketer or some automated call. But when I glanced at the screen, my heart gave a sudden uneven thump. 35 missed calls. 35. All from my daughter. I sat down slowly staring at the blinking notifications. My first instinct was disbelief. How could she have called that many times without leaving a single message? The answer was complicated. I realized as a quiet tension settled over me like a heavy blanket. I remembered the look in her eyes when she told me to leave. Polite, controlled, yet filled with an undercurrent of something, fear, guilt, or perhaps the pressure of expectations she had chosen to place above love. For a week, I had let the silence teach me. I had let the absence of her voice speak more clearly than any words ever could. Curiosity and a quiet patience I didn't know I possessed made me wait before calling back. I needed to understand, not react. When I finally dialed, her voice was hesitant on the other end, breaking the polished tone. I remembered. "Mother, I'm sorry." There it was. The cracks in the armor. Her husband was in the background speaking softly. And I realized that these calls were orchestrated, deliberate attempts at reconciliation. But the truth I saw through the careful pauses and careful phrasing was deeper than mere regret. She had been pressured. She had been quieted. She had been asked to choose between the home she loved and the peace her husband demanded. And in that choosing, she had unknowingly abandoned me, the person who had always loved her unconditionally. Listening quietly, I felt no rush to demand explanations or apologies. I noticed subtle signs, her voice trembling when she said my name, her hesitation before each sentence that revealed what I had known all along. The house I had left was no longer a home for me, and she had been trapped in her own way, unable to act freely. I hung up without replying immediately. 35 missed calls did not require immediate answers. They required observation, reflection, and a calm mind capable of seeing the entire picture. That night, I sat by my window and let the cool air brush against my face. For the first time in years, I felt a strange combination of sadness, clarity, and surprisingly strength. I began to understand the beauty of boundaries. I had left not out of anger, but out of respect for myself. I had honored my own dignity while letting the silence do what words often could not. And now, even as the calls persisted, I realized that the lesson had been learned by all parties. Some truths reveal themselves slowly through observation, patience, and quiet reflection. The pressure my daughter felt, the control her husband wielded, the delicate balance of love and fear, all of it became clear to me. I no longer needed to be hurt by it. I no longer needed to plead or argue. I had already chosen the path that led to peace. And in that choice, I discovered a power I had forgotten I possessed. The power to walk away with my dignity intact, to wait quietly, and to allow life itself to reveal the consequences of choices made. By the time the 8th day arrived, I was ready to respond, not with anger, not with reproach, but with calm clarity, patience, and a gentle strength that no one could unsettle. I was finally seeing the full picture, and in that quiet, I felt an unexpected lightness settle over my heart. It was then I realized true strength does not shout. It waits. It observes. And when the time comes, it acts with wisdom, not impulse. The morning after the 35 missed calls, I woke early, the sunlight spilling softly across my small apartment. For the first time since leaving, I didn't feel a pull in my chest. No ache of abandonment, only a quiet clarity. Today, I would respond, but not in haste, not in anger, and certainly not with desperation. I had learned something invaluable. My peace was worth more than anyone else's approval. I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching people walk along the narrow street below, each absorbed in their own lives. It struck me that life moves forward, whether we cling to the past or let it go. I had clung for too long, hoping love would bridge gaps that were never meant to be crossed. But now, calm wisdom guided my actions. I finally dialed my daughter's number. She answered hesitantly, her voice brittle. "Mother, are you okay?" she asked. I smiled softly, though she could not see me. "I am," I said, letting my voice carry warmth, but also firmness. "I wanted to speak with you, not to argue, not to hurt, but to be honest." I explained gently that I had left because I could not live under rules that disregarded my dignity, that I had given us all space to reflect. I did not scold. I did not demand apologies. I simply spoke the truth I had lived. Love must honor boundaries and respect cannot be optional. There was a pause, long and heavy. I knew she was listening, truly listening for the first time. Perhaps noticing the quiet strength I had carried with me these past days. I understand, Mother," she whispered almost brokenly. I didn't mean for things to go this far, and that was enough. I did not need more words because the lesson had already been felt. Life has a way of revealing truth, not through confrontation, but through consequences and reflection. I had allowed the space for that realization to happen naturally, and after the call, I felt a lightness I had not known in years. I realized that I had been seeking validation in a home where my presence was conditional, measured by rules that were never mine. By leaving, I had reclaimed something far more precious, my self-respect. In the week that followed, my daughter did not call excessively. Our relationship, though still delicate, began to find a new rhythm, one built not on obligation, but on mutual understanding. I visited only when invited, no longer attempting to overstep or impose. And in doing so, I discovered the beauty of quiet boundaries. Sitting alone in my apartment one evening, I watched my reflection in the window. I saw a grandmother who had once been trusting, gentle, perhaps even naive. But now I saw someone calm, strong, and unwavering. The pain I had endured had not hardened me into bitterness. It had refined me into clarity. I understood then that love does not require sacrifice of self. Respect cannot be borrowed or begged for. It must be present or the bond will never endure. I had learned that lesson not through confrontation or anger, but through patience, observation, and the courage to step away when my dignity demanded it. I closed my eyes, feeling a profound sense of peace. The world outside continued to move. The sun set, and somewhere far away my daughter began to understand the quiet truth. I had always known. Boundaries protect love, respect nurtures it, and strength is often silent. In choosing myself, I had not lost family. I had preserved it in a way that was honest, calm, and enduring. And that I realized with a gentle smile was a victory far greater than any argument or plea could ever have achieved.